For Global Business Update, Michael Wilson joins us now from Cape Town, South Africa. Good morning, Michael.
Good morning. Let's look at the Asia-Pacific markets first of all, and the standout really detail from all that is Japan, which is continuing with its ultra-loose monetary policy. It hasn't changed where it stands with interest rate minus 0.1%, nor has it altered its way of tracking the yield curve. Now, this is a very technical way of actually tweaking monetary policy, but basically it is actually staying completely where it is. The feeling is that that therefore caused the yen to weaken very slightly, stocks up 2%. But that was really the standout news. As far as China is concerned, now this is back to Davos, and the Vice President Liu of China says that China needs to abandon, or rather the whole world needs to abandon the Cold War attitude towards China. What there should be now is cooperation and sustainability between the various world powers. And he's going to meet Janet Yellen, who's the US Treasury Secretary, at Davos today at some point to talk much more detail about that. The Chinese economy will recover faster and earlier than expected. This is according to Citi. It recorded growth figures 3% yesterday, not really high as far as China is concerned, but better than expected. So that's basically in line with what's happening there. As far as the US is concerned, the Dow down 400 points yesterday. A lot of worries really about earnings coming in there. Now, United was slightly better, and their shares were up 1%, but and Moderna up slightly better. But Goldman Sachs down about 6%. The reason for that is that deal making is seen to be waning in the United States, as a result of what they think is going to happen to the recession. By contrast, Morgan Stanley, on its wealth side of its investment policy, was up 5.9%. But Goldman Sachs really weighing on the market as far as the United States is concerned. The United States also at Davos now is talking to Taiwan about trade negotiations. That will continue there. It's been going on for 4 days, not at Davos, but it's expected to conclude with some kind of announcements there. No surprise that the United States is trying to engender more ties with Taiwan, given the supposed Chinese threat to the company. The former US Secretary of State, Henry Kissinger, has been speaking at Davos and has been underlining the fact that he feels that the Ukraine should have membership of NATO. And he's also saying that Russia should be given a chance to join what's happening as far as the international situation is concerned, after there is what he hopes will be a solution to the Ukraine invasion. Elon Musk has been declared by the various jurors, who again, he's got a trial coming up, as narcissistic and off his rocker. That was what the jurors are saying, and this is pre-trial as well. Those of us who look at balance sheets fairly close will also note that he needs to make a $1.5 billion payment for the interest on the loan which he took out, $13 billion worth of debt to buy Twitter. So that will actually happen, and that is looming. That has to be sorted out by the end of this month. As far as Disney's concerned, now a boardroom battle there. I said there would be one, and it most certainly is. Bob Iger is mounting the defence of Disney against Nelson Peltz, who is a renowned shareholder activator and activist as well. He's actually saying he took on Procter and Gamble, and he also took on and he also took on other large companies like Unilever as an activist shareholder. And what Iger is saying, what Disney is saying, this man may be an activist shareholder, but what he doesn't do is have any experience of the media, and therefore they're calling that into question. He is saying that the pace of acquisitions in Disney has been too fast, and they've concentrated too much on trying to catch up with the streaming business that is dominated by the likes of Netflix and so on, and basically they should be concentrating elsewhere. The IMF has said, and this is a note of optimism now, which is going around Davos, as I understand it. It's sort of an upbeat mood that they signal that they may well be adapting what they feel is going to happen in the world economy. You remember they said that they feared a third of the world was going to go into recession this year. Now they may well change that view over the next few days, and certainly Germany's premier Olaf Scholz has said that country will not go into recession. He's been saying that at Davos as well. As far as the UK is concerned, Jim Ratcliffe is lining up for a formal bid for Manchester United, his company there, and it's felt as though that there will be competition from Asia, there will be competition from other countries as well, particularly the Middle East, and the person who eventually buys Manchester United will have to spend at least £2 billion on the ground itself, and this is nothing to do with the business model, nothing to do with buying that Manchester United has created as an international global brand. UK, some breaking news. Inflation has fallen for the second month in a row, down to 10.5% in December, as opposed to 10.7% in November. However, that's a very, very small thing. That may show that inflation is peaking in the UK in the same way that it's felt it has in the United States. But pay rises in the UK have not kept pace with inflation, and nor has nor has there been any change in the strikes. The big one facing the rail and other industries is February the 1st. That's the next one. As far as Bitcoin's concerned, that's recouped most of its losses since FTX was first brought to our attention, and since that company collapsed. It's back now at 21,500. It lost about 22% after FTX, but it's back again. It's making some sort of comeback. It's been down to $16,000. Will that increase? FTX new CEO is saying that he faces, this is John Ray, facing a Herculean task to try to get investor assets out of the damage caused by the FTX collapse. And finally, oil, again, up on renewed optimism about China, very, very slightly, but manufacturing in the US has softened very, very slightly, so that could be a downward kind of push. OPEC is expecting the additional pull from China to be up to 500 barrels a day. So there you have it, a mixed view for oil, but more optimism at Davos about the rest of the world globally.
Well, thank you, Michael. Let me start with Eric Kissinger. His position at that Davos summit, well, isn't it to be expected? The man who brokered ceasefire in Vietnam, rapprochement with China, and détente with Russia. Clearly, it's clear that if the world isolates Russia as a state, then of course that could result in future conflicts. Well, you recall that in May he had said Ukraine should cede part of its territory to Russia to have peace, and that became very controversial. But I wanted to ask you about Alibaba and Tencent. The Chinese government has now taken golden shares in those two companies. Now, what does that mean in real terms? Are there risks that are associated with that? Then today, Financial Times has a story on its front page about how the fall in the population of China, the highest since 1960, from about 10% plus last year to 6.7%. Now, how does that mark a turning point for the rest of the world? Are we supposed to be jubilating that Chinese population is coming down? Even when we have another country, India, that's likely to overtake China in terms of population.
I brought the story about populations China dropped to you yesterday, and we discussed it then, but I'll continue to discuss it today. The most interesting thing about that is it's the population drop, and the percentage of the population at working population level, which is 62% of the population. That is the most important figure, and that has obvious consequences for China, and we would like to import more from China, and we would like to export more to China. But, as I continue to say, that China suffers from a demographic problem of having too many old people effectively, and even though a number of those are dying from COVID, as has been announced, the problem worrying the authorities was the policy that has reduced the working population there, and they need to do something about that fairly rapidly. The Chinese government taking golden stakes. Again, we talked about this last week. China is taking what's called golden shares in Alibaba and Tencent, to name but two. The reason it's doing that is to exert its control, not by regulation, but by being part of the shareholder setup. What that actually means in terms of what their influence over these two companies will be, it's very unclear. But a golden share is something that involves the state in the future corporate decision making of both those companies, and that's how the Chinese state is now seeking to take control. So it is control, but it's in another kind of way. As far as Henry Kissinger is concerned, well, this is what Davos is all about, isn't it? I mean, he was very much more saying when you referenced, we talked about this in May. He was very much more referencing the fact that Ukraine ought to settle with Russia. He's not quite saying that now. What he's saying is that Ukraine should join NATO. Okay, fine. I think most of us agree with that. And secondly, that when it comes to it, Russia will need to be have it as it were the rest of the world's arms encircling it. Again, which is something which I think most of us would agree with at some stage. Now, this is the real difficulty, isn't it? How you actually turn Russia from being this threatening autocratic world power into something which wants to sit relatively comfortably at the high table with the rest of the developed nations in the world. That is the real task ahead. So I don't think I quoted Kissinger at Davos because he's a major world figure. What he's saying, I think most people would agree with.
Well, let's look at the power of a tweet, with Musk being described as narcissistic, erratic. He's being sued for by shareholders who feel that his tweet on the 7th of August 2018, where he had claimed that he had secured funding to take the Tesla private, was fraudulent, because it happened that he hadn't actually secured funding, even though in his defense he's saying that he had a Saudi Arabia firm that he had conversations with, and he thought he was going to have funding for the car makers. I'd like to just a few more details on that particular case, where it's heading, and the future of Musk at Tesla. And then the second bit is on Sir Ratcliffe, because we spoke about this yesterday during the sports segment. And Manchester United, Glazer brothers looking to sell, who's going to be the new owners of Manchester United, the fact that they've set up at Davos, and claims around the fact that they're looking to attract investors in Davos, and they're saying no, they're not. They're just there to provide a lounge and just be a part of the conversations. But now it's official that Sir Jim Ratcliffe, who had made a bid unsuccessfully for Chelsea, is now in the running for being the new owner of Manchester United. Do you think, are there other frontliners? They say that by March or thereabouts, they should be looking at a new owner if the Glazer brothers do indeed sell, or the Glazer family.
Depends on the price as far as Manchester United is concerned. And we do know that Jim Ratcliffe was interested in Chelsea, and after he didn't get Chelsea, he did speak to the Glazer brothers, who were not putting Manchester United in play for a takeover. They are now, and I think he will have plenty of rivals from Asia, as I said, and also from Middle East countries as well, that would like to get a slice of Premier League action, because it clearly is profitable. And Manchester United is one of those marketing global phenomena as far as marketing is concerned. But it will be expensive. Jim Ratcliffe is a long-time supporter of Manchester United. I feel as though the supporters would probably quite like that. However, I think a lot of them have a very romantic idea of where Manchester United ought to be. It is a business, and he is a businessman. And whilst he is a long-time Manchester United supporter, I suspect he won't have any illusions about what he needs to do with Manchester United, who are currently fourth in the Premier League. Their on-field form has been better. Their business is actually quite huge, and the spending on Manchester United will be absolutely massive. I have no idea how much, and nor does anybody else, because the parts of this deal are relatively closed at the moment. But I can tell you that the ground itself will cost £2 billion to redevelop, which they clearly will be looking towards. So it will be a huge price. I mean, he may be, as one of the UK's richest men, if not the richest man in the UK, ideally placed for this. But we will see. As far as Elon Musk is concerned, not quite the richest person in the world, but certainly we're talking about Twitter, not Tesla, and Twitter is basically what he actually was going to, saying that he was going to take the thing private rather rather than public. Now, and that's where the Tesla bit comes in as well. I said at the time, if I were the Securities and Exchange Commission in the United States, I would be investigating somebody who was actually talking to shareholders through a social media site. That is not the way to do things. He may well be narcissistic. He may well be off his rocker. He is a clear force within the world because he is such a rich man. And I have no idea what's going to happen with Twitter. Again, I said in the past, it's not the kind of place that I'd particularly like to work, because nor would Tesla be either, because I like a management that knows where it's going, and I don't get the impression of that from Twitter or from Tesla at the moment. I feel as though his attention is divided between the two. The court case will be very interesting.
Well, just a quick comment on Elon Musk about his narcissism. You know, he had the effrontery to tell the court in San Francisco that he didn't think that the jury in California would be kind to him, and that they wanted the case transferred to Texas. Now, such effrontery. And I thought it was a good thing that the judge declined, and the case will be heard in California. And in 3 weeks, we'd like to know what happened. But the other issue with Elon Musk that I was going to bring up was that they are selling things at the Twitter headquarters in San Francisco. Neon lights, refrigerators, mirrors, in fact, carpets are on sale. You know, is that how to generate revenue? How about that as a business strategy? Because he says he wants to generate revenue and cut costs.
I think that's selling things as a PR exercise. I mean, however much it actually gains through the sale is not going to make the slightest bit of difference to Twitter or Tesla or the future of either of them. I mean, it is strange that we're hearing these kind of comments from a jury, but they have rather a strange selection process of the jury, which is allowed to comment before trials. I mean, that certainly would not be allowed in the UK. There's a similar kind of selection process, but it's not as long-winded as that in the United States. I feel that Musk is probably his own worst enemy as far as talking to the public through a social media site is concerned. And I said in the past, and I will continue to say it, you know, that is not the way to entrust information to shareholders, nor does it give them any confidence at all. And I suspect that the jury will be as hostile as juries are supposed to be. However, that is not to say that the legal process will not be served properly in the United States. Why should it not? That's what a judge is for.
Thank you, Michael.